One Sunday, our pastor, Miles McPherson, told us about the 3 times that he got cut from the NFL. He said that the first time he was sad, the second time he was mad, the third time he was glad. He said the first time he was sad because he worked so hard to get this NFL dream, and he felt like he just got taken away from him. Like maybe he wasn't good enough to fulfill this dream that he's had since he was a little kid to play in the NFL. The second time he was mad because he felt like he put in the work and he was good enough to be on the team, but he still got cut. And honestly, I get those first two. When disappointments happen in life, those are pretty natural reactions, right? When I get disappointed, sometimes I get sad, often I get mad. But the last time didn't make a lot of sense to me. He said that third time he was glad, but he was glad because, not because he got cut, but because he knew that God had a plan. And he knew that if he was gonna get cut from the NFL, he knew that God had a plan for him to do something else. And if a long career in the NFL was not part of God's plan for his life, he was okay with that. See, by that time, he had found Jesus. And he found out that he was called to the ministry. So when he got cut from the team, he stepped into ministry. He started doing ministry, launched his church. Almost 20 years later, we have the Rock Church. It's a big church with multiple campuses all around San Diego and online campuses that reaches thousands of people all around the world. And Miles McPherson is doing exactly what God called him to do. So the first lesson here is God has a plan. When you get cut, when you have disappointment, when you lose a job or a relationship or something disappointing or doesn't go the way you thought it was gonna go or hoped it was gonna go, God still has a plan. And maybe the reason that that thing fell away, that you lost that job or this relationship is broken is maybe because God has a plan to bring you something better. Maybe God doesn't want you working at that job anymore. Maybe God doesn't want you living in that city anymore. Maybe God doesn't want you to have a relationship with that person anymore. Maybe God has something else for you. Remember that God has a plan in every situation. That's why Paul says to rejoice in all circumstances, to count it all joy, because everything, in every situation, you can have joy, you can be glad knowing that God has a plan and that this is all part of God's plan for your life. So keep your head up. The second thing I want to talk about is when I first heard that story from Pastor Miles, the first thing that I thought of was if getting cut was part of God's plan, then maybe he should have never tried out for the NFL to begin with. I'm pretty sure that's how a lot of us think. At least that's how I think, is if God removes this job from me, then that means I made a mistake by taking that job to begin with. But what God told me through his story is that getting cut was part of the plan, but so was trying out. And in our minds, it doesn't really make a lot of sense because it's like either you want me to do this or you don't. But God might want you there for a season. He might want you there for just a short amount of time. God absolutely wanted Miles McPherson in the NFL. Not the least of which is because he never would have started his ministry here in San Diego. He's from New York. He played for the Chargers. That's why he's in San Diego. That's what brought him here to Southern California. That's why he started his church here. That's why he is literally impacting thousands and thousands every single Sunday for the kingdom of God. That's why he's ministering. That's why he has such a huge impact here in San Diego, because he played for the Chargers. But also the connections that he's made, the influence that he has with current NFL players, the former NFL players, just the clout of walking in a room. If he went to talk to some high school football players, he would have all of their attention immediately just by saying, I made it to the NFL. Because that's what every single one of them want to do. So he can walk in a room and immediately has their attention because he made it to the NFL. So God absolutely wanted Pastor Miles to be in the NFL. But then he wanted him to be done with the NFL and launch his ministry. There's things in our lives that God has removed. And for me, I start to second guess them, like, if you're removing this, then maybe I made a mistake to even do that to begin with. Just because God removes it doesn't mean it was a mistake. You might not even know the reason for 20, 30 years down the road. You might never know the reason until you get to heaven and you meet somebody up there and they're like, that semester that you went to that school, you had a huge impact on my life, and now I know Jesus, and now I'm here in heaven because of you. So I want to encourage you that whatever season of life you're in, be faithful in that season. And if God removes you from that season, that's okay. Move on, but understand that that season was still there for a reason. Whether you know it or not now, that season still had a purpose. And God still had a purpose for you in that season. Joss and I are moving back to Minnesota, and the season of our life in San Diego is coming to an end. And it's easy for us to say, well, if we're supposed to move back now, does that mean we weren't supposed to come out here? But I don't think that's the case. I think God had us here for a season to accomplish certain things. And there's some things that I know about that God accomplished here. And I think there's a lot of things that we won't ever know. Relationships that we made, people that we affected, experiences that we had, things that we got that we never would have gotten if we didn't move here to San Diego. So yes, moving back to Minnesota is part of God's plan. But so is living in San Diego for that season. So don't get discouraged if something changes or something in your life seems disappointing at the time. All we can really do is trust God. Because whether we understand it or not, He's got a plan.